watching online now,
Yeah.
and then they'll post. Like apparently parents have come and we've not. Have you heard about the
So
moms
I
talks?
actually really enjoy that you. Okay, 5.2 is administration of oath to the superintendent.
Okay, I have to say something else here too. Give me a second.
Yeah, and I would say my apologies for not being in person tonight. As the board knows, I did have a family emergency, so I'm upstate. But Valerie and I have already spoken, and we've spoken with legal counsel as well, and they've advised that I can be sworn in when I return, so better to do it in person. And then actually there is no statutory requirement annually. It's good practice, but certainly me not being sworn in tonight will have no negative impact on the functioning of the district. So as soon as I'm back in district, we will take care of that right away.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Champ.
You're welcome.
Okay, ready to keep going? Okay, so moving to item 6, which is board action and discussion items. We could take this as a consent agenda, so a motion to take 6.1 and all the way through 6.15 as a consent agenda. A motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so are there any comments or questions on these designations for the year? Comments? Questions? No? Okay.
Distinguished now.
I see Jim reaching for his microphone, so I'm going to let him talk, but I would just say much of this first portion of the agenda tonight is annual reauthorizations for some various functions of the district. Jim, if you want to add to that, I'd appreciate it.
That's a great description, Dr. Champ. Again, for this, as the board looks at the descriptions of each of these items on board action, they are fairly self-explanatory for our regular operations of board operations, and this is these are the regular appointments that we have every year.
Okay. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any
Aye.
abstentions? Okay. Motion carries. Let's see. So now we're on item 7, approval of committee on special education members and committee on preschool special education members. We can take, I'll take a motion to take as a consent agenda 7.1 to 7.8.
So moved. Second.
Okay. Any comments or questions?
And again, on this one, I would just toss to Ms. Holtz to just maybe add a little color to a couple of these, what parent members are, what surrogate parents are, and what function they serve within the CSE process, just so folks have a little bit of background there.
Thank you, Dr. Champ. So the majority of these appointments are so that we can run our committees, CSE committees, subcommittees, 504 committees. In here, you'll also see appointments of parent members and a surrogate parent. Parent members represent community of parents of students with disabilities for CPSE and CSE meetings. According to the Part 200 regulations, the parent member has to have a student with a disability residing in the school district. And also, it has, or a student that's graduated within a period of 5 years. The parent members go through training that has been developed to ensure that all members of the CSE and CPSE function effectively in their role. And in addition, their training is designed to assist parents during CSE meetings should they have any questions about the committee process. Parent members are not advocates, but they help parents understand and participate in the meeting process, explaining procedures and just ensuring if there are any questions or clarifying information. So that's the role of a parent member. A parent surrogate is someone that the Board of Education appoints also to represent a student with a disability that may not have a parent or a guardian. This could be someone that's in foster care, someone who's homeless, unaccompanied youth. So they are appointed to act in the role as a parent or guardian representative of the student in their interests during a meeting.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed, any abstentions? All right. right. Oh, so we're at section 8, which is, I'll take a motion to adjourn the annual reorganization meeting.
So moved.
We're not leaving. Okay.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So I will now call to order the business meeting of July 2nd, 2024. So welcome to the welcome to the business meeting of July 2nd, 2024. As we begin this new board year, I'm delighted to have with us our new board members, Catherine and Dara. Welcome. And also to have Dr. Fitzgerald with us, who's our new Director for Human Resources and Leadership. Welcome to our board meetings. And so here's to a promising board year ahead. Before we move through the agenda for the business meeting, I'm going to read into the record the school district's position on the Village of Pelham's eminent domain proceeding regarding Julienne's playground. This was already read at the Village of Pelham's public hearing on this matter that took place a few weeks ago. It was necessary for the school district to state our objections at that hearing in order to protect the district's interests. So I'll read that letter now into our record. Dear Mayor Mullen and Ms. Palavetsky, the district shares the village's concerns regarding flood mitigation and seeks to work cooperatively with the village to achieve that goal and to preserve the Julienne's playground property for public use for generations to come. By this letter, submitted at today's public hearing, the district objects on multiple grounds as set forth to the proposed use of eminent domain or condemnation as the vehicle to advance the flood mitigation project. 1, the district objects to this eminent domain condemnation as the village, a condemner, is attempting to take property owned by another condemner with equal condemnation rights, and when said property was, is, and will be used for a prior and future public use as originally anticipated. 2, the district objects to this condemnation as the proposed construction will render the site unusable for any future district facility, as the presence of massive underground tanks leaves no options for future build-out for future public use, including the building of much-needed school facilities in conformance with the district's long-term vision. 3, the district objects to this condemnation, which has been in part improperly categorized as an easement when given the nature and extent of the underground facility proposed to be constructed, it constitutes a full taking, leaving this site unbuildable for future educational uses. 4, the district objects to this condemnation as all options and alternatives should be fully vetted for flood mitigation, as well as to preserve this property for an important district public use. 5, the district objects to this condemnation as the village has failed to take into account the potential liabilities imposed upon the district and the taxpayers of the district upon completion of this project. Moreover, such potential liabilities cannot be cured by mere indemnification, language, and contracts. Potential liabilities including but are not limited to personal injury, property damage, and environmental contamination will necessarily follow the construction and ownership of this site, including but not limited to the dangers posed by significant storage of diesel fuel on site. 6, the district objects to the condemnation of this property as the village has not taken into account the dire need for school facilities going forward and/or the suitability of this site for construction of such facilities. The district's strategic plan notes the importance of early childhood education, and the property proposed to be condemned would be well suited for a facility to address this educational need already identified by the district. 7, the district objects to this condemnation as the village has not offered the district any reasonable compensation for the property, nor have they offered any alternative sites for a potential land swap as proposed by the district, given the de facto extent of the proposed taking. 8, the district objects to this condemnation if the district maintains ownership of the property throughout construction of this project. Major project delays are likely to result due to the New York State Education Department approvals that may be necessary, and the need for the management of that process by district staff will be unduly burdensome. 9, the district objects to this condemnation because the Village of Pelham has failed to negotiate regarding the village acquiring the property and fee. The district will continue to work towards a negotiated solution that will obviate the need for a lengthy and costly litigation that will only burden the taxpayers of Pelham. Thank you for listening. It's long. Okay. We can move on to Section 10, approval of the minutes. We can take that as a consent agenda, 10.1 to 10.6. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any comments or questions on the minutes? No? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. We'll move on to Section 11. So this is public hearings. So I'll take a motion to recess the business meeting and convene a public hearing on the draft district safety plan.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Do we have comments or questions on the district's safety plan? the
And
new-
I
the
can,
new
I can
plan?
share with the board, every year, the board has to modify and review the district-wide safety plan. And that work has been done this particular spring in cooperation with our Alteris safety consultant. Now that the district-wide safety plan has been amended and it is a public-facing document, it is now available for public comment, which has to have at least a 30-day comment period. And then if district-wide safety plan needs to be approved prior to the opening of school. So this evening, we're opening that comment period, the 30-day comment period, with the expectation that any comments will be received prior to when the board is expected to take action at the meeting of August. I believe it's August 21st as far as we know right now. But the meeting prior to the beginning of school. And this is the normal practice that we follow every year. In addition to the district-wide safety plans, we have building safety plans, which are confidential in nature, so they're not public-facing documents. But all that documentation is reviewed and submitted to state and is provided to the state authorities, and it is also provided accessibility to our local public safety partners as well as part of our safety planning.
Okay. So at this point, no major updates similar to last year?
That's correct. The most significant is that safety drills this next school year are to be made public prior to them happening. So whether that's what we would consider we call them evacuation drills, but most of us think of them as fire drills. Those would have to have pre-notification to the school community, to the parent and the local surrounding area, as well as our lockdown drills. So just a little bit more notification than what we've previously had as part of the state's new regulations.
Now,
Thank
Jim,
you.
You said,
And Jim, if I could just add to that, the rationale behind that, I think the board would be interested in knowing too, is really to take a more trauma-informed approach as anxiety levels have increased with students and adults. I think the state was very much interested in us working to have these procedures and protocols in place, but also at the same time being cognizant of not raising the anxiety level for students and staff as well as families. So that's kind of the why behind that change. So we think it's an important one and a positive one. It's going to be a little bit challenging on the fire drills, but we will adapt as always.
Jim, I have a question. You said that now the document is going to be public facing?
Yes.
Where can
So,
a parent find it?
Great point. On the district webpage, you'll be able to see you can see the district-wide safety plan, and then we'll also have the draft district-wide safety plan available for viewing.
Okay, and if they want to, there's a link there that they could submit the comments or just email your
You
office?
can email our comments to our office or to the clerk of the board for any comments.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any communications and comments from the public regarding the district safety plan? No? Okay. So motion to close the public hearing on the draft district safety plan and convene another public hearing on the draft district code of conduct.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Dr. Champ, do you want to take us through the code of conduct?
Yeah, happily. Very, very similar. The board is required to adopt the code of conduct on an annual review and then adopt the code of conduct on an annual basis. So what you have before you tonight is our existing code of conduct, and again, for a 30-day comment period. Have been no changes to the code of conduct since it was approved last year. I just wanted the board to be aware of that. The other piece that I would add, as the board knows, we do a lot of policy work throughout each school year. If we do adopt a policy during the school year that in any way conflicts with the code of conduct, the policy itself would then supersede the code. So our goal over the course of time would then be to, in the following year, to update the code of conduct. So, one example where there's been several changes over the last several years, and there are, again, more yet to come, would be in the area of Title IX and sexual harassment policies. Those have been changing several times over the last couple of years as administrations changed. So we are waiting for more guidance from legal. So we expect to be updating that policy in the coming Title IX and sexual harassment policies within the coming school year. So again, at that time, once a new policy was adopted, those would then prevail over the code of conduct, and we would do the respective code of conduct updates in the following year. So just something to be aware of. But this code that's before you tonight is the same code that was provided to the board a year ago at the same time for adoption.
So just to confirm, if policy changes that impacts the code of conduct, the code of conduct's not immediately updated. It's updated in the next year.
In the next cycle.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Any more comments or questions? Do we have any communications and comments from the public regarding the code of conduct? No. Okay. I make a motion to close the public hearing on the draft district code of conduct and convene the business meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I am going to do I need to make a motion to move up section 15? Or can we just move up section 15?
Yes, I believe you can move it up without a
I
motion.
can just move it up. I want to move up the superintendent's personnel recommendations because we have a personnel recommendation that we want to walk through.
So yeah,
Dr.
Jackie,
Chen?
if you would go ahead and make the motion, and then Dr. Fitzgerald and I will add a little bit of commentary.
Okay. So we'll take it as a consent agenda, a motion to take 15.1 to 15.4 as a consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Great. So thank you so much, and I appreciate you moving that up. We're really excited tonight. We do a lot of hiring this time of year. So what you see within those motions certainly is hiring to prepare us for the summer and for the school year ahead. But what we wanted to take just a moment to highlight tonight, we're very appreciative to have her with us there tonight, and that is the hiring for our leave replacement for an interim director of humanities. So we're very pleased and excited to have Ms. Susan Short joining Pelham for the year. And I am going to actually toss the mic to Dr. Fitzgerald to add a little bit of color and to properly welcome Ms. Short, who is here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Champ. So actually, Suzanne was at our admin retreat the last 2 days, so she's jumped in, full on in, and we were so happy to have her join us. So Suzanne, as Dr. Champ said, is going to be appointed as our interim director of humanities. She comes to us with a lot of experience. She has classroom teaching experience, she has coordinator experience, she has building leadership experience. So we're really thankful for her to join our team. She's written curriculum, she has implemented curriculum, she's led the work that's been completely student-focused. Suzanne comes to us holding a bachelor's from Fredonia in English and secondary education with a minor in Spanish literature. She has a master's from Lehman College in English literature, an advanced certificate in educational leadership from Stony Brook, and if that's not enough, she's currently pursuing her doctorate from Purdue University. So we're really thrilled to have Suzanne join our team.
Welcome.
And I think since the board already acted on that motion, it's official, Suzanne. So
Thank
welcome.
you. And thank you, Chris.
Yes, we'd love to just give you a moment to share a few words.
Thank you. I know you guys have a lot going on tonight, so I won't take much time. The best gift I had was that there are also students here tonight, because that is certainly what makes me happy. Thank you for the opportunity to join Pelham. As Dr. Fitzgerald said, I've spent the last 2 days with them. The work you're doing here speaks for itself. It's amazing. The fact that you give so much voice to your administrators in the process of strategic planning and discussion and thinking is overwhelming and an amazing thing that you're doing. I'm excited to dive back into curriculum and instruction. It's where my passion is, and it's kind of what I'm really looking to do to fill my bucket, so to speak, and I'm just grateful to be part of such a great community and further the work that you're already doing here. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations. Okay, we'll move back to item 12, which is communications and comments from the public.
And I would certainly add Ms. Short is welcome to go celebrate and
Yes.
does not need to
Yes.
stay for the remainder of the meeting this evening. She's really appreciate her being here these last 2 days and
Thank
look
you
forward
for the
to her great work. Thank you.
All right. Is it picking up? Can you hear me all right? Okay, great. Hello, board members, Dr. Champ, and all
So
other.
we need name and address, I'm sorry.
Oh, first?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay, sorry. I'm Kira Findikian, and I live at 107 Cliff Avenue in Pelham. Okay. Hello, board members, Dr. Champ, and all other participants tonight. For those who I haven't had the opportunity to meet, my name is Kira Findikian, and I'm a rising senior and the president of PMHS for the coming school year. It is my hope that the board has a strong and active connection to the students for the 2024 to 2025 school year, and I look forward to fostering that connection and working with you on issues that arise. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. I know how important the cell phone policy is to students, parents, and staff alike. While I understand that survey results were taken into account when the board created these two proposals, what I'll call stricter or more lenient, I have had dozens of concerned classmates approach me and have discussed this issue with enough teachers that I feel a responsibility to speak on behalf of our current student body. I want to begin by acknowledging the valid research about how negative social media is for teenage mental health. I agree with the Surgeon General, and I know it seems hard to believe, but students do understand that there are dangers to our phones if there are not some limitations. But the scope of those limitations are what I'm here to talk about today. We have to acknowledge that social media is only one part of phone usage, that phones are all but required for our schoolwork and how to turn in our assignments through Google Classroom, and that we cannot ignore that for our generation, communication with our parents and with each other in times of repeated crisis is a necessity, not only for our mental health, but also for our physical well-being. I want to add that no student denies that cell phones in class can be distracting, but I'm here today to express that student opinion that a near total cell phone ban, putting in place the stricter cell phone policy that has been proposed, is not in the best interest of our students, and here's why. I understand the goal of Pelham education is not only to teach our students, but to properly prepare them for post-high school plans and the real world, whether that be through college or the workforce. First and foremost, that means students learning themselves when to put their phones down. Please understand that the very real and practical day-to-day situation of the current cell phone policy is that there are teachers who make it clear to students that they need to put their phones down and pay attention. And it does happen. Students do pay attention and students do want to learn. By mandating a policy, you aren't giving students the responsibility and choice about how to learn and how to put our phones away. This is especially important because the two proposed plans being voted on determine whether or not students can have their cell phones during their free time. Class time should be about class, and free time should allow students to connect and use their phones on their own time. It should be up to students to use their time in a way that makes the most sense for them. Second, the change in policy would have a dramatic and jarring effect on how students complete their work. I don't know if the board has truly considered how, since kindergarten, this generation of students has been instructed and trained to utilize technology to work, complete, and turn in assignments. Pelham has mandated Google Classroom, and the mobile app is used extensively by PMHS students. This is not an at-home and at-night usage. We're using our phones for uploading, for monitoring assignments, and even doing research all day long. As I've just finished my junior year, I can't count the times that I use my phone during the day for schoolwork. Finally, a topic that I know will be controversial, but I want to make sure you have considered. I am sadly part of the generation of school shootings and serious school incidents. While I wish it wasn't the case, we have grown up in a time when the threat of that reality is something we feel when we walk through the school doors each morning. And quite honestly, we need to be able to contact family each time there's a lockdown or message from the school. That's unfortunately because it is our anxiety, our stress, and living today in 2024. We want to avoid future conflict and communication issues, and I have heard from peers who are truly still distressed from the past events at our school and are fearful about future threats, especially given the possible inability to reach out to their parents. In your effort to try to address mental health and anxiety, you may be unknowingly snatching away that mental health support and lifeline when students need it the most. Classmates of mine have explained to me the importance of their cell phones in these times, not only for the connection to their parents, but because their devices allow for cross-campus communication between them, their friends, and even their siblings. It is critical for students to have access to their phones in these moments of extreme stress and anxiety, especially during those lunch and free periods, when students feel it's finally safe to take a moment to themselves and reach out for support. Though I have nothing but good things to say about our school's mental health resources, students still tell me that they prefer to reach out to their trusted friends, siblings, and guardians via their cell phone. What happens when they don't have it? Although I know the board has narrowed the policy to stricter or more lenient, if you must impose a cell phone policy, I urge you to consider the more lenient version, and either way, provide us all with more detail as to how this is going to work. First, enforcement is a big question. The first line of defense has to be the teachers, imposing even more of a burden on them to not only teach, but to now police what students don't want to follow. Sending a student to the office and confiscating their device takes time away from class and learning and distracts other students. Another issue that arises is the open campus nature of our high school. There's still a lot of gray area regarding how our phones will be confiscated and when we can expect to see them. Due to our extremely confined cafeteria, there is no space for high schoolers. This leads to upperclassmen traveling off campus to nearby stores and in turn needing to be notified via cell phone about lockdown drills and fire drills. The off-campus aspect of our school, which I can say I'm very grateful for, has made the communication and safety alerts that the school provides to students' cell phones an absolute necessity. So how can we navigate that going forward? A final question I ask the board to consider is the implementation of whatever cell phone policy is decided as layered. I find the middle school cell phone policy to be fair, given students' maturity levels are developing, and some students should not even be on social media because of age restrictions. However, I believe the same policies do not and should not apply to high school age students. In the end, I recognize that this is a complex issue, and I want to reiterate that I am not in any way saying no cell phone restriction policies are necessary. Instead, I'm urging the board to meet the students where we are and vote accordingly for the more lenient policy. Thank you again for listening.
Thank you.
Yes.
Great one, Kira. I'm Amanda Jaskowitz, 264 Eastland Avenue. I'm here to comment on the digital device policy. I was here on the June 18th meeting when the board discussed and voted 5-2 after a flip to continue discussions with the most restrictive option. I didn't get up to speak when Mr. Treves opened up the floor. I wanted to, as Ms. Maria had expressed earlier on a separate agenda item, listen to what everyone had to say, take notes, reflect, and then write and rewrite. To be honest, I'm a bit perplexed with the board's approach on this whole thing. It felt like there were different conversations merged together. Social media is bad. Cell phones are bad. I don't disagree with you that there is an issue with social media. In fact, many adults should probably limit their usage of for their own mental health. And although cell phones are one vehicle for accessing, engaging with social media, not all applications accessible by cell phones are bad. Yes, limiting access can reduce distraction, temptation to scroll during instructional time, but with your decision to move forward with the most restrictive for high school, the language is as close to a ban as we can get. I did email Dr. Champ and the board members after the first policy reading, asking if the most restrictive policy was a potential violation of FERPA. And Dr. Champ mentioned during the June 18th meeting that she's still waiting for the lawyers to get back to her. Hopefully we can get an update on that tonight. So going back to the process, parents provided input at the World Cafe. 546 students and 30 instructional staff completed the surveys for the high school. Disappointing that only 30 instructional staff did the survey, by the way. But based on the results, the majority still said to keep the current high school approach as is. So why do all of that work to then ignore the feedback and the data? Why not keep it as is for now, make it a board-level policy that will then ensure consistent enforcement, and come up with a strategy to build upon this policy for the following year, especially in the area of building connection. So I understand that you're trying to think about the students, but without the proper implementation, any well-intentioned idea could fall flat. I do believe that there are more variabilities that should be in consideration. Maybe more time to figure this all out. Any new policy should not be rushed. It has long-lasting impact. For example, will the administration in 2 months come up with other platforms, ways for teams and clubs to communicate with each other, as they've all been on GroupMe? What will these platforms be? Is there a cost to it? Will the district have set up by September accessible lunch options available on campus if Uber Eats is no longer allowed? Not every student wants to or has the time to go off campus. Some don't even have a lunch period. How quickly can special ed and guidance reach out to 504 IEP families to make them aware of the changes in the high school and get accommodation requests? And can they be added to their official documentation by September start date? Will they need to review to validate the requests beforehand? Will the more restricted option allow students to use their phones during Olympics? I'm just throwing that out there. And as seniors navigate the college application process, will they be allowed to bring their own laptop to work on their submissions on Common App or other college websites during the school day? I had a 2022 high school graduate. She was applying for programs that required her to send in pre-screened videos and extra essays. She had to have her laptop with her to be able to do that during her free periods because she couldn't do it on the school-issued Chromebook. Will that be allowed under the new policy? Or will students need to go home during free periods? Is that what's being encouraged? I would hope not. The point being, the language you decide to have in the policy has to offer clarity and direction, ensuring the best scenario for success. One example seen of this, similar to the current high school approach, but with more specificity, is a policy put in place by Scarsdale 2 years ago. They call it off and away for the day. But it's a tiered approach that calls for different cell phone use depending on what activity the student is doing. But I haven't been able to find any updated information on whether this is working 2 years on. As a final note, if the primary concern is social media use and cyberbullying, this alone will not eliminate or reduce that. As confirmed at the World Cafe, most of these actions happen off campus. I do see a movement with the younger families considering holding off on cell phones and social media until their children are older. And maybe that with time, that will offer up a much needed cultural change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments from the public? Okay. Thank you. I'll move on to, so, should Dr. Chen answer the question?
about FERPA.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Dr. Champ, do you have additional information about FERPA and and cell phone use that we could provide?
Did you want me to talk about that while we look at the policy itself, or did you want to move the policy up at this point? Or I can just answer the question here.
Who's answered that question?
Answer the
Yeah,
question.
you just,
Yeah.
yeah. If you-
So we did get some information back from the attorney, and their advice to us at this point in time, as I understand it, is that it would not necessarily be a violation of student privacy. If students, if there were a permission for a student to be using a phone, there would likely be a conversation with the parent, and the parent would be part of that process and would be well aware of we really have a say as to, whether the use of the digital device would be appropriate and would be something that they would want their child to have access to for the medical reasons or any other medical 504, et cetera. So there would be basically a parental choice in there, therefore parental permission as part of that. There would be a variety of reasons why students could be permitted to have their digital device. So it's not necessarily specifying that a student using a digital device is a student with disabilities, for example. So given that it is a broader range of reasons why phones could be permitted, the attorneys did not feel that was necessarily a violation of their student privacy.
Thank you, Dr. Champ. Okay. Okay. If we move to item 13, financial reports and motions, we can take this as a consent agenda, 13.1 through 13.66. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Oh, 6.9?
6.9.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, again, I
Yeah, any
can speak
comments?
to this item, and
Thank you.
Happy New Year. It's the beginning of the school year for us and
Yeah.
our fiscal
Happy New Year.
year. And as we do that, we have to move forward with operations for our next school year. And what you're seeing here is many of those agreements that we have as a school district, our insurances, our agreements with service providers, and different consultants that we may use throughout the school year. First item up is 13.1, which is generally the most unpopular one, but one we need is that to raise taxes. And that's for the tax warrant for us, the school district, to send to the tax collector to send out the school tax bill. So that's one of our items that we do every year. And again, as we look through these items, you'll see it's a normal course of business. We have cyber insurance, we have property insurance. We have agreements with our local BOCES for cooperative services, for professional pupil personnel services that we have here. Things like investigative services that we may use for residency investigations. I certainly know there's been some discussion about that. And that is, we do engage the services of an investigator for those items rather robustly. So I could share that information just for a little bit of flavor for that for the board. Over the course of last year, there was conducted at least 150 surveillances as they occur. And these are not interactive surveillances. They do not engage with those that are surveilling, so they're passive. But that's part of our residency work and our residency investigation. And I know the board is briefed periodically on these things, and it's not always things we can bring to the public. But there is quite a bit of work that we work with in that particular category.
And just to clarify, 150 surveillances doesn't mean that it's 150 students.
That's a
Not
very
right,
good
no.
point, and I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to clarify that point. So we can have a surveillance one day. Let's say if a particular student claims to live at one address, we may have to surveil two separate locations, the address of record and the address where they may actually reside. So that could be two surveillances in that day. That's not the normal, but the other instance, it's making, again, knocking on a door to see if someone particularly resides in a location, if we're looking for any particular information. But it's a process, And part of that process is we work with an investigator in some instances. We don't work with an investigator in all instances. But when we need to do that, we work with a licensed professional investigator. And they also work with other school districts, so they're certainly familiar with the work of the business.
Thank you.
Those are some of the things, our legal agreements, our agreements with our facilities professionals, professional engineers. We have engineers that look at our roofs, that look at our facades of our buildings. We have engagements with architects because a lot of different things come up. And then we have leases because we have after-school programs that third-party providers operate at some of our elementary schools. So Pelham Children's Center, for instance, at Hutchinson School, Playful Wonders at Siwanoy. There's been some talk about perhaps expanding those programs at Colonial and Prospect Hill. And on this agenda this evening, it's also providing the authorization for the district to enter into those agreements if those organizations are able to sustain those operations. So again, be able to provide greater services to the students and the families of the students in our district. And the rates that we use are fair, I believe, and uniform, so that we're not charging different rates to different organizations for something like before school care or after school care. Otherwise, we do have, which was approved earlier, just facility use schedules, which were approved earlier in this meeting.
If I just also add, because there are a number of things that are mine in this area. You'll also have here contracts with us and other schools. We have a small amount of school districts that send students here for some of our special education programs. And we also have contracts with the out-of-district schools that we send our students to, so that's in here. You will find in here also Student Assistance Services. That's the agency that provides the drug and alcohol education and support services in our middle school and high school. That contract is in here. Sharon Charles, she's our part-time social worker in the middle school. That contract is in here as well. Translation services for the district is in here. Our district medical director, Dr. Legue, his contract is in here. A lot of other are agencies that provide home tutoring for students that are home because of an illness or possibly a suspension. That's in here. And again, for just some of our related service providers, OT, PT, speech, assistive technology, that's what's mixed in here as well. I just wanted to make sure if you had any questions about that.
Thank you. Does anyone have more comments or questions on these? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, we'll move on to item 14, which is policy monitoring and governance. This is the third reading, a motion to go into the third reading of the digital device policy.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Do we have to vote on that? No. Do we just start talking about it, right? Okay. Yes. Oh, we're supposed to make a motion to adopt the policy tonight?
Yeah, I think
We're gonna
it makes
discuss the
sense to
policy
start.
and then have a motion on something to adopt.
Okay.
Once we decide what
Can we
that
do-
is.
So we can discuss now?
That's
Okay.
correct. Yeah,
Before making that
discuss
motion.
first and then make your motion after discussion.
We'll make, yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
sounds good. Okay. Who wants to, Sid, Will, kick this off?
Sure, I can kick this off. We had a long discussion about this at the last meeting. I am supportive of doing something here. I think it's we're going to need to move from where we are, but I also think that there's a transition period involved, and there's a lot of work to be done to get to where the majority of the board was at the last meeting. So what I would propose is a change to the policy as proposed to say that for this coming year, the policy will be what we call the less restrictive approach, where it's no cell phones in the classroom, and the following year move to the more restrictive approach, and to, in the meantime, work with the administration to have them come up with a plan that we can discuss and support to implement that transition, because I think there's a fair bit of work to do in the interim.
Okay, I'll go. So while I was one of the people who opposed the more restrictive policy in the last meeting, but that's not because I don't believe that we should be regulating cell phone use in the high school. I do believe that. But after considering all of the information that we've had available to us, like you said, I think a phased approach is probably the best course. And this year, our focus should be on limiting cell phone use in the classrooms and learning spaces, where students are spending most of their school day anyway. I'm confident that that will positively impact attention and learning in the classroom. And then throughout the year, Mr. Llewellyn and Dr. Tatone can work on defining and planning for broader cell phone-free environments in the high school, one that goes beyond learning spaces potentially, with the recommendation, and they should have a recommendation ready to implement in the 2025-2026 school year. I think a phased approach would allow the district to gather feedback, secure any resources they need to do this, and ensure effective implementation.
And see how things go this year.
And see how things go this year. So you're suggesting to put language in that focuses on the classroom and learning spaces this year.
Mm-hmm.
I have some language for, and I'll just read it, and you can consider it. The policy for 2025 and beyond, the policy shall transition to include most or all spaces and times within the school being cell phone free, as recommended by the administration in a transition plan presented to the Board of Education by the end of the 2024-2025 school year. I think that would allow for what we're talking about, the administration to have time to plan effectively for the next stage.
Sid, so I have a question. So are you saying you are okay with the restrictive policy for classroom, in the classroom, but not like in the hallways? So it becomes restrictive at learning spaces.
Yeah, so what I was suggesting was for this coming year that we focus on the classrooms and the other learning spaces, so assemblies and, right, but I think there's been some discussion in policy committee and even here about, the challenges of addressing passing time and some of the other more free-form parts of the day. And so focusing on, getting things right in the classrooms first, and then looking to broaden that in the following year potentially. So that's how I was thinking about it. Yes.
So I'm a proponent of the stricter policy. I don't think cell phones belong in the classroom or in a school setting. I understand. I totally get it. Like, we all use these for, to get what we need. However, I do think the Scarsdale policy, and I go there because it's a school district that we, I think, in Pelham all admire, has had very good policy of away for the day, and, you know, it's something that I think we should emulate. Now, I don't have any hard numbers or data, just from people that I know there. They're very happy with the fact that the kids just carry their phones with them, but it's not necessarily being used throughout the school day. I also don't have any experience with the high school. My experience is with the middle school, and I've been very happy with the middle school policy of away for the day. I don't think any of us are naive and think that social media is going to go away. I think, you know, as soon as kids leave the high school, they're going to get on their social media and do whatever they could need to do, and that's totally fine. My concern is having a space where the teachers are supported and they're not telling people to put their cell phones away, but really concentrating on what this building means, which is an educational setting, and we're all here to learn and to have peer interactions. As I look around, not just this country, but other countries have come down very hard on cell phones in education. After our meeting, you know, New York City, the largest school district, announced that they're coming out with a policy to stop cell phones from being used in the classrooms. We knew about LA, so they're also doing it. I know the whole state of Florida, but, you know. So there's other districts out there who are doing this. This is not a Pelham only. And again, I look at this from how do we help and do more to make sure that our education, that our district is top notch. I just see this as an extension or something that we could implement. Is it going to be hard? Absolutely. But is it doable? Of course. We've done harder things. We've done way harder things in this district. I don't have a problem with giving some leeway and some time for this policy to be implemented, as long as it's done right. But I will leave the implementation to Dr. Champ and her cabinet, and I have so much respect for the fact that I know that they're going to get it right when they implement it. But I still would like a restricted policy.
Natalie, just for clarification, when you say a restrictive policy, like specifically, what does it mean to you? Because I sometimes think, I wonder, are we agreeing on things or think we're disagreeing on things? So,
No?
yeah,
To
what
me,
is
it's a way for the day. To me, it's the middle school policy. It's
Middle
you
school
put it
policy.
away, you don't use it, you know.
if you see it out, like if someone's walking in the hall and you see it out, a monitor
Yeah,
sees it,
it-
the phone.
Well, I don't think at the high school, they just tell you go see Miss Sabia or something, and then Miss Sabia just tell them, don't do it again, and then they get back into the classroom. Look,
In the
I
middle
don't,
school.
I think for the first probably couple of months, it's just gonna be like an education campaign. Hey, reminder, don't use your cell phones. And then we come up with a date that said, we've now lived in this world where we don't use our cell phones, so now everybody kind of, maybe I'm just naive, but that's how I envision, that's the way I envision things.
So the middle
So-
school
Right.
policy, okay.
Right. I don't envision us taking away cell phones when people come in through the doors. That's just me.
But when you mentioned Scarsdale, that's actually, I know they have a way for the day, but the policy is actually tiered.
Yeah, it's more option A. It's the more lenient
Yeah.
policy
That's,
compared to like what we were talking about.
Well, right now, our policy, which is not as guidance, is kids are ordering food and kids are dropping
For-
pictures into each other's and opening Instagram accounts at 10 o'clock in the morning. So that's
no,
what we have today.
Yes, no, totally get it. But meaning Scarsdale doesn't have the strict, according to the article. Like you said, I don't have recent data. I've been looking for it. But from what I read in the video that they put out to their parents and students, et cetera, about why they were looking at limiting cell phones, what they described was more akin to what we had in the option A version of the policy, not the full-out ban. Like they had phases where you could have your phone out. You shouldn't be scrolling, going through Instagram, but you could have it out if you needed to look up something for class or.
Right. And to me, that's a strict policy if you go to a teacher and said, I need it for whatever reason. But they must have, and I know it's hard, right? But they must have that conversation and not just, I'm going to take it out because I want to look at what my Instagram is doing today.
And
Yeah,
I
although I
think
think it was, go ahead.
that to me sounds like option A. So like, for example, when I think about, and maybe I'll just use this time to share what my thoughts on this. I like the idea of a phased approach, but I'm going to just add more detail to it. So I think in the coming year, as you know how I voted, the policy should basically solidify what the guidelines are right now, which are not being enforced, but make it a policy so that in learning environments, there's no cell phones. So, I had some stuff written down that I actually want to say first. First, I'm really glad that as a board we can talk about this, right? And we can talk about this in public and have a healthy discussion about it. I also want to say that I am very, very supportive of a cell phone-free learning environment. I'm also very interested in what a cell phone-free day looks like, right? So, and I say interested I use that word because this is where, for me, I draw a bit of a line, and that is I want that sort of decision or direction to come from the administration. So, for example, if in this first year, 24-25, we are asking the administration to actually enforce the guidelines, no cell phones in learning settings, and then I'm very supportive of the idea of some sort of group being brought together. And in most cases we're talking, I know like a lot of we're talking about the high school and, really allowing the administration, Mr. Llewellyn and Dr. Titone, to do the necessary work to figure out, okay, the board has said we're interested in what a cell phone-free day looks like, not even just a cell phone-free learning environment. Can you look into that, however you're going to do that? We don't tell them how, right? And get back to us. And maybe there's a timeline on it. I don't know what the details are. I would want to hear from them then, okay, this is what it would look like. Because there's so many little details. Like I know some people got up to talk at, public comment, and there are a million, not a million, there are many ways that cell phones are being used that we're not thinking about, right? So I come from the perspective where I would like to see the administration, for us to say to the administration, us as a board think that a cell phone-free day could be really healthy for kids. It's clearly what's going on around the country. And we'd like you to investigate that. We'd like you to do the work to figure out what would it take? What would that look like? What's required? And then learn from them, so then a policy can be written, if needed, to make that happen. So, because I want to say for the record that I'm not a cell phone pusher. I am totally supportive of a cell phone-free learning environment, and I am very interested and like the idea of a cell phone-free day, but I want the approach to be such that it comes from the administrators, because what I have found is that our relationship with the administration has been great, and our communication back and forth has been great, and I know they're clearly very aware of this conversation. But even beyond us, they care about this, because I've said in committee meetings that we've been in together where they're talking about cell phones, and it's not the board who's leading those discussions, right? So they care very much. So the difference for me is putting a policy in place that comes as a directive down from us to them versus saying, okay, enforce the guidelines this coming year. Everyone agrees, no cell phones in the classroom. And please look at what a cell phone-free environment looks like, and look at, all the things that it would take to make that happen, and then a report back to the board so that we can then understand this is what it looks like for Pelham. Because I also think, and trust me, this has been weighing on me. And I know with probably a lot of us have read, a ton of articles and listened to things and really are trying to gather as much information as possible. And what I think sometimes is left out, small things, but they matter. When you'll read an article, you get down in the article and you realize they're talking about a ban in a middle school or an elementary school because there are cases, situations where cell phones are still being allowed, right? I think there's a big difference between a middle schooler and a high schooler, and the changes that happen, the ways that cell phones are used in the high school need to be considered. So we can't compare ourselves to the middle school. Not to say that there aren't solutions. I know that the clubs and sports teams communicate via GroupMe. Maybe what comes back, I'm just going to make this up, maybe what comes back is now we need to have screens all over school, kiosks all over school so that kids could look up when practices. I'm making this up, please. I don't want anyone to take this out of context. But my point being is that there's so many things to consider. I defer to the administration, and I have a ton of trust in them because they do care very much about this, to then come back to us and say, okay, here's what furthering this policy could look like. Here's what a more cell phone free school could look like. Here's what a complete cell phone free school could look like. And letting them tell us. That's where I come from. Those are my thoughts.
I think that's consistent in a lot of ways with what I had in mind, in the sense that I'm thinking of this as sort of firm policy from the board for this year about what our expectations are, and a direction for where we'd like to see things to go for future years, with input from the administration about what the right way is to get there. So I think we're...
I think so. And I guess what it is I leave room for them to say, you know what? The way Pelham is designed and our culture and whatever else, we don't recommend 100% cell phone ban for Pelham, and here's why. But here's what we do recommend, right? So I would like it to be open at this point versus solidified in a policy, so that those conversations can happen, knowing that we all want the same thing, that we all worry about the same things when it comes to phones.
Yeah, no, I just want to echo Anne-Marie in terms of, regardless of where you come out on this matter, the quality of the discussion has been very constructive, and I think that's good and it's healthy, and I'm pleased about that. I think one of the things that makes this a sort of contentious issue, and a couple of the folks in the audience mentioned this earlier, is like the data, right? And the surveys and the focus groups, or rather the World Cafe and what we heard there. And I think that, I've looked at the same data that everyone else has, from the focus groups, from the World Cafe and the surveys, and I think one of the there's that old saying, like, if you beat the data hard enough, it'll tell you what you want to hear. And I think there's enough in my opinion, enough sort of grey area, enough ambiguity in the responses, so that it'll kind of confirm where you emotionally feel on the issue. I don't think there's a binary answer in the data, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're kind of struggling a bit to sort of thread the needle and figure out the best path forward. So I think there's a lot of interpretation of the Pelham data. There's a lot of news stories out there. There are a lot of studies. It's a lot of volume of information, and it can be hard to sort of parse that and get to the truth. But there is one thing that we do know, and it's one of the things that kind of fed into and continues to feed into my sort of relatively sort of radical kind of position on this, which is what happened in Pelham. And what happened in Pelham is there was a rule set and around cell phone usage, and I think it's fair to say it was completely ignored. Completely ignored. Like, whether it was in the student handbook or anywhere else, there are rules, guidelines, whatever you want to call them, that were designed to restrict cell phone usage, and they failed. And so I guess my question, and really this is sort of for Dr. Champ as the superintendent, is for someone like me who believes that option 2 is the way forward, and for someone like me who is in part in favor of option 2 because I have seen a failure of a previous rule set. Like, what reassurance could you give me and people like me, or people who think like me, that option 1 would work this time? Because it didn't seem to the last time it was tried.
So I'll jump in there, and I excuse me, sorry if my earbuds die in the midst of this, but I'll do my best to jump over if need be. I guess I would take a little issue, respectfully, with complete failure, because I think the system that was set up before was set up to enable teachers to have autonomy in their classrooms. And I think that's exactly what we have. Is some teachers do want a completely phone-free learning environment, while others are just have a different perspective, whether it's that they want them to be used instructionally, used for organization. They allow students to have them on their person and maybe check, but maybe it's not specific use. There's just a range of, teachers were given autonomy, and so there's a range of implementation. So I think the areas where the original policy was set out that proved most problematic, and that it's really not being, we talked about this before, the espoused policy versus the enacted policy, those are the areas that are by nature looser and more challenging to police. So, in the current policy, it says that it's not allowed in hallways and study hall, for example. Hallways, there's just not enough people to try to fight the battle of students keeping them in their pocket and not in their hand, and not using them during the breaks, because unless we have, monitors and supervisors in every single hallway and every single floor, every single bell change, that's going to be very, very difficult, nigh unto impossible to enforce. Study hall, again, teachers have autonomy for how they wanted to manage their study halls. And in some cases, we heard from teachers, it was actually useful to allow students to use their phones, because if the goal is to have a quiet working environment for students who want to do their work, for some students listening to their music, or listening to a podcast, or listening to a comm app, whatever it may be, actually help them to be more quiet and focused during that time. So I think it was well-intentioned, but I think those two areas proved to be challenging for different reasons, and not necessarily because of a lack of attempted enforcement, but the minute you have a range of flexibility and autonomy, as soon as you open that door, then it definitely creates an environment that is going to be less consistent. So that being said, a couple things moving forward. We already talked with the administrators about some ideas for the coming year. And of course, they don't have a fully formed plan at this point, because they're not sure which policy that we'll be putting in place, but there has clearly been initial thinking. When you look at implementing of any kind of management strategy in a school system, the more consistency you can provide, the better. So, a simple change that could very easily provide more consistency within the classrooms would be, instead of teachers being offered a calculator holder, and if they want it by choice and they use it by choice, very simple fix and simple change that could net much more consistent classroom environment, that would, in a directive to teachers about a little bit more, clear directive, put those calculator holders in every classroom and require all teachers to use them and require all students to put them in. That alone will take out 90% of your inconsistency from classroom to classroom, and would provide that distraction-free learning environment that I think we're all agreed around. And then from there, it can be used by exception. So I think that's a very, very simple move, and that's one that when you start at the beginning of the school year with the resource in place, the expectation in place, and it's an expectation that everyone consistently is asked to uphold, students and staff, you're already starting from a very different place than how the current existing policy was crafted. I would add just a couple more things in there. There's lots of ideas that come out, and I do think, there's lots of issues that were raised around this that I think we have the tools in place to assess, and I think it is fair to give the building time to assess. We do have a lot of systems that were created to that actually digital devices, whether it's the Chromebook or Google app on the phone, our system is created to make use of those tools for communication and for academic purposes. So if we are going to shift away from those, we do have to have replacement pieces, and that may take some time. I've spoken with the building administrators, and already their thought is to put together a task force, shared stakeholder task force, and I'm hoping people like Kira, students, parents, staff members will get engaged in that committee. And because, as you see, just listening to Kira speak, our kids are amazingly thoughtful, they're respectful, they understand themselves, they understand the greater system, but they also understand the world that they are preparing for outside of our schools. So I think to give the building administrators time to put together that task force to report back to the board in next spring, I think would be really a wise move. That would enable them to tackle questions like that. How are we going to communicate amongst teams and clubs? How are we going to enable students to submit their work? How are we going to enable our students to communicate effectively with colleges, knowing the high level and caliber of the colleges that our students go to and the expectations of those colleges? All of these are really important questions for us. And then even going back to some of the logistical pieces that the parent raised, one of the things that, and it may sound little, but very often you have to change behavior before beliefs will follow. So we've talked a lot about how do we create more peer-to-peer engagement, more opportunities for students. So I've already been talking with the building administrators about simple things like how can we use the schedule to solve some of our space issues, meaning the cafeteria, but then also create new opportunities for students to be together. So Dr. Titone, in building the schedule this year, worked to try to get as many 9th graders into 7th period lunch as possible. So I say that because, and many of you on the board already know, the middle school uses the cafeteria periods 4, 5, and 6 for grades 6, 7, and 8, respectively. But that means cafeteria is wide open periods 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, and 9. So a very simple thing that we can do to move students out of the hallway. 9th graders don't have open campus anyway, so they need to be somewhere. They should be somewhere supervised. So I think we've got about half of the class is going to be scheduled to have lunch together 7th period in the cafeteria. So that gets students out of the hallway, gets students together, gives us an opportunity to provide activities and intentionality to them connecting face-to-face, peer-to-peer. And that helps us to shift the culture and also to train them as new high school students that peer-to-peer connections, being together, that is the culture. That is how we want our schools to be, and not having students to default to the phone. So if we can start to shift that, that's going to really help. I've also asked them to take a look at, even during periods 4, 5, and 6, how many middle schoolers are in the cafeteria, how many seats are open, and how do we create a more inviting space, some segment, carve out a corner of the cafeteria specifically for high school students so that they don't have to go out of the building, as was raised before. Additionally, folks may not realize Whitson's has a grab and go section. So for those students who don't have lunch, or for maybe they don't have time to pop into the cafeteria to sit during those periods, there is an opportunity for them to have access to food in the building throughout the school year. So we're trying to find ways like that, and we'll probably be reaching out to the PEF maybe with some grants to make the spaces more inviting and provide activities to bring students there. So we're thinking about these things, and I think we do have, back to your original question, Will, removing the inconsistency across the classrooms will have exponential, will make implementation of this in the instructional spaces just exponentially more consistent and therefore more effective. And then creating spaces in the existing cafeteria and using time and space more effectively is going to start to create the positive side of this, so we can start to shape the culture. I think in a year's time, we're going to be in a very different place with cell phone use around the building.
Can I say
Okay. So I'm new, joining this conversation tonight, right, for the first time as a board member, but. Sorry. Whoa. Whoa. So I'm joining this conversation as a board member tonight for the first time, but I have been following it as a community member, and I am keenly aware and acutely aware of the connection between social media use and mental health. And I think that the thing that I've heard this whole time from everybody, and that I would say I'm in agreement with, is that we're all saying that we think social media or that cell phones, are harmful to mental health or do have an impact, and that a cell phone free experience in the classrooms at school would be a very positive thing for our students. And as Kira so lovely mentioned, there's many uses for cell phones above and beyond social media that are really important to a school day. Especially, I think the anxiety piece of our students, we know that anxiety is a very big mental health issue that we are dealing with now. And a lot of our students are afflicted with really severe anxiety and need to know that they can reach their trusted adult at any time or their trusted group of people. And for some students, those trusted adults or those trusted friends, maybe their tribe isn't in Pelham schools. Maybe their tribe is at a different school or somebody that they know from an after-school camp program in the summertime or something. And it's important for them to be able to reach their friends who they might not see or be able to see in person during the day. I think just think of that as like one reason to be able to keep a cell phone. That's just one. I think that because this area, and everyone's sort of agreeing that we need to do something, but it's kind of gray as to, as Will mentioned, what exactly that looks like. And there's a lot of questions, and what I keep hearing and coming back to myself is the how. How are we going to do this? How is this going to look? What are the implications of anything or any policy that we put in place for our students in the building? And how is our administration, going to implement that? And I think the input from our administration and our students in the building is worth so much, because they're the ones that are living it, and they're the ones that and our administrators have to execute, and they're the experts on the building and understanding all of these little tiny things that we aren't even capable of thinking of, because that's not what we do on a day-to-day basis. So there would be no way that we would be able to think of all of the little pieces or implications that a cell phone or really restrictive cell phone policy could have. And I think that alone is a really good reason to start slow or start with a less restrictive option, or turn our current, if our current policy isn't working, or it's not even a policy, if our current handbook guidelines aren't working, and we've heard that it would be beneficial or helpful to have a policy that the administrators could hang their hat on and say, hey, look, guys, this is a mandate now, we have to do this, and that would help them enforce those guidelines and start there and see what that looks like, with the option to reevaluate and then slowly layer on additional restrictions or additional rules. I think Emery, you said it so well. A lot of what you said were in my notes of what I've been, thinking about over the last couple of weeks about the policy. And I think we don't want to get this wrong. This is really important, and we don't want to get this wrong. Or not wrong, but we just want to make sure we can make everyone feel really successful. And I don't see how starting with a less restrictive policy and then reevaluating and building in phases or building in the timeline, the reevaluation timeline, to get that feedback from our administrators and giving our administrators the time to like come up with a well thought out and well formed plan. I don't see how that could be seen as irresponsible or not being like not taking the steps that we need to make sure that our, you know, we are doing something to address the cell phone issue. I mean, I think it would be a responsible way to address this as a district.
Dara, I see you.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to, just to, thank you. Just forgive me. It's really late here. I'm just really thrilled to be able to be a part of this. I know this is a really important discussion and conversation. So I'm going to be very brief and to the point. Been doing a lot of listening. And again, as a new board member, trying to really dive right in and understand all the perspectives. I think it seems pretty clear the cell-free experience, we're all, driving towards that. I think there's three things for me that seem very clear. One, as Will said, that the data is not very strong, right? The data is not very strong. The administrators haven't really had a chance to really think through a plan and collaborate with the board, right? There's a very, again, we need to really collaborate. I feel like that's really important to advance this forward and give the administrators an opportunity to think through this and develop a strong plan with the same outcomes in mind, and give a little flexibility to that and what will be discovered through that. Because a lot of questions that I've asked, there's not a lot of
maybe
clear
turn off
answers
your
around
camera.
the impact and what that plan would look like. So I think we do need a little bit of time. That's really my perspective around ensuring that the administrators are supported, and that's our job as I see it as the board. They really have the opportunity to develop a plan and provide their input, and to come back to the table around that and really think through. Hello?
You're breaking up a bit, sadly.
Yeah, Dara, I think we can still hear you. If you could keep your
I'm so
camera
sorry.
off, if you keep your camera off while you talk, that will probably help. And then you can put it back on for voting.
No problem. I'm so sorry. Did I get lost at any point? Should I start from the? Should I start?
No, I think we heard
beginning?
most of what you were saying. I think
Okay,
you
great.
said you had three points. I think you got through your first point. Giving the administrators time to craft a plan was the last that I heard clearly.
What was the last? Thank you. Yeah, I think really thinking through the impact of it all. I've asked a lot of questions to a lot of different folks as it relates to their position, and I think we do need a little time with the common goal to again create a cell-free, environment, but with the flexibility of what that looks like. Again, I don't think we know now. I've never walked into anything with developing a plan knowing exactly where it has to end up, and I think things will be discovered along the way, and how do we make it better and stronger. So that's my perspective.
I do have a procedure, I guess, or I don't even know what to call it. So last time we met, we had a vote, right, on this policy, 5-2. So on the third reading,
Yes.
what, I know when we've done policy, we read it twice. If there's a policy that there's no comments or it's fairly straightforward, it's just, changing a word here and there, we do 2 readings. This one obviously consumed us a bit. So we have the third reading. So what happens, the board last time met to follow the restrictive policy. And I thought, my understanding was we were meeting to kind of tweak the language a bit onto implementation of that. But now I'm a little maybe not aware of so now what is what are we voting on? Or are we re-voting, or do we not have to vote? Like, I'm just now confused, to be honest.
So we talked about this a little bit in policy committee at one point.
Okay, good.
Apparently, the three readings are, like, we call them three readings, but it's actually, the requirement is 3 meetings where we discuss the policy and what it might look like. And so it's not a requirement that, that the same policy without amendment gets discussed 3 times, or, that it gets voted out 3 times in a row. So, the board can decide to amend what was proposed at the last meeting or voted on at the last meeting, and then approve it as amended, if that's what it wants to do.
So, I think, Sid, to your earlier, I can't remember who proposed the language. Was it you, Jackie, or was it you, Sid? But someone proposed some language to kind of amend the policy.
Yep.
And was it you, Jackie?
No,
I think we
both.
both.
Oh, it was you.
We both
I think we
proposed
both
different,
All right.
slightly different things, but yeah.
Sorry. And I think I just want to get a bit of clarity around what the true intention here is, or really what is going to be written. And is it the case that the amendment that is being proposed would still have option 2 as the eventual policy, and there's no change to that, but there is a transitionary period of option 1 for the school year, for this coming school year. And so I just want to make sure that option 2 is still in effect, still in play, but we are just amending, I guess, how we get there, and just having a transitionary period with option 1. Is that the intention of what you were proposing?
The intention of the language I proposed is to have a period of time where, like you said, option A is in effect, and at the same time as that's happening, the administration, along with a committee, would develop a transition plan to a more, so the language I use, to be cell phone free in most or all spaces. And the reason why I have most in there is to leave room for the opportunity for that transition plan to say, maybe there is a time and place where a cell phone could be used in the high school.
I guess my question is, does option 2 remain intact, or are we saying, actually, the thing we voted on in the last meeting, we're kind of just putting it aside and we'll get there when we get there, or does option 2 remain intact?
The actual language?
Correct, yeah.
The language I had would actually replace 2.
Okay.
It would-
Okay.
Yeah, I'm forgetting what your language. What is your language?
The way I had written it was sort of.
It went from 1 to 2.
It went from 1 to 2.
Yeah, which
With 2 as like the target for
Right.
the second year and beyond.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on board. I guess
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
the punchline is, I'm on board with that,
Yeah.
right? The only thing worse than not having option 2 for me is implementing option 2 and it just not being
Doesn't
a
work.
success.
Yeah.
Right.
And so if the goal of what you're proposing is to leave option 2 intact and have a transitionary period, then I'm supportive of that. I'm supportive of that.
And I had actually talked to you about that. Like, we were supportive of, because that 1 year with the first option was the transition year, but in the end game, option 2 was still on the table for subsequent years once that transition period, which was like a year, took place.
And are we defining that transitionary period as just 1 year with no, I guess 2 questions. Are we defining the transitionary period as just being a year, and after a year, then we have to get to the more restrictive option?
Yes.
And then is there any room or consideration for optionality for our administrators to then come back to us and say, we need another year, or it doesn't, maybe option B as written isn't going to be appropriate? We need, like, is there any sort of room for our administrators to like, are we leaving them any room for any optionality of, like, of their own, I guess, is, or like,
Well, I mean-
to come back to us and say, like, we need to think about this in a different way?
I mean, policies can get changed, and it can be an iterative process, but I think the idea is to have a goal for where we'd like to end up, and we'll get feedback along the way. And I don't know that your language is really all that different, other than sort of noting that it might be that there are some times or places within the school day on campus where there might be a choice for where the district might decide that it was appropriate or acceptable.
Yeah, and it makes room for the recommendation, like a recommendation by the administration,
Yeah.
which is, I think, what you're saying, Catherine.
But
That if we just move to option 2, which says no cell phones at school at all, with the same exceptions that are in version A, it doesn't really leave any room for, so basically the transition plan that the administration would be working on, it wouldn't take into account anyone's feedback that we still need cell phones to do this, or we still need cell phones to do that.
Although I think that the way that option 2 was written before, you could say, we think that, seniors need to be able to interact with their
Science research
college,
mentor.
science research or
Or, yeah, or
colleges. But they have to go to the guidance office to do that. Like, there's going to be a place and a time for that.
I mean, but does, oh, sorry.
Right, I don't know,
Sorry.
maybe that's not feasible. Maybe,
I
maybe
think
the administration
the-
says that doesn't work, but
But I think
maybe
that's a good
we try and like find ways to address the issues that people are raising in a way that sort of doesn't make it in the middle of everyone else all the time. Like, we try and find a place for people who are doing it to be.
But I think that's a really good point, though, you're making, is that there are so many things like that. Why are we writing a policy without giving the administration a chance to figure it all out and then have the policy?
But Anne-Marie, I do think Will had something to say about that, which was, there was guideline, it wasn't working, and we saw some
But Dr.
failure on
Chan-
it.
But
Right,
they
but she
said that it-
answered that by saying that the guidelines were not actually
A policy.
They,
It was-
they weren't a
weren't
policy.
enforced.
They
So
weren't
they-
enforced, and they weren't a policy. So I'm in favor of a learning-free, no,
So-
not learning-free,
Learning-free school environment.
a cell phone-free learning environment where those calculator pockets are in every classroom. You walk in, maybe you get a number, you're always number 2, you stick your phone in the pocket. That's not what happened this year, or I'm not even sure how many years it's been in place, but it was, teachers were given the option to ask for one of those hanging things. But your point, like your example, Sid, is a good one, right? Because, and I heard a snicker coming from the audience of seniors in science research, knowing that they might say to you, that would never work, right? We don't know. So why not give the administration the time, the faith, the trust, the belief that they're going to come up with something and look at all these situations to then, at that point, we write a policy that actually reflects what's possible and really believe in the fact that they would like as much as us, maybe not, we might be on a spectrum here, but to have as free a day free of phones as possible.
So what I think is important about the second piece is that we communicate to the administration what we would like the end goal to be in terms of a day that is more free of cell phone use, and then get input on what that looks like what can be feasible from that. That's how I think think about it.
But you're
so
saying-
like
So,
not just
I think-
saying
But that's not what two.
But you're saying make that actually policy, though. Because what we're
That's a
doing is saying
plan.
we're going to make it policy, but we're just delaying it a year.
Yeah, I think what my understanding is that we would want a plan that is going in that direction, and then the policy would be solidified, because that's the idea behind the plan, is to be able to say, this is going to be the end policy, of a learning education, a free, cell phone free environment. But there's so many pieces, it seems, that need to be sort of thought through, that I believe that the administrator needs to make that plan. But my feeling is it's in good faith, like that is what they will be doing. And we as a board say we're required, like one of this is we need to see a plan. Like by next year, we need to see a plan and what that looks like for us to consider what the policy will be to support that.
So I would like to say, and Dr. Champ, I'm going to share a conversation or, what that we had. I said, because the governor had said she was planning, she doesn't like cell phones in school setting, and she would like to ban them. What happens if that takes place, right? Like, if she comes down and says, I'm done, 6 months down the line, we should have no cell phone, New York State, done. What will we do as a school, right? We will have to put a plan together. We wouldn't have to have all these conversations. I mean, part of me just wishes that would take place and it will remove all this. But as a district, right, the administrators will have to step in and make that happen fairly quickly. So, and Dr. Champ said, don't you worry, we could make it happen. So if it's don't you worry, we kind of could make it happen, and there could be plans out there. I also think there could be plans out there for what we're just talking about, like a policy where we are cell phone free for the day.
I agree with you, and I think the difference is, for me, is I believe, like if we said it's going to be option 2, what we voted on last time, for this September, they would do it, right? Because we know that they would do it, and they would make it happen. For me, it's more about that's not the relationship we have with the administration. Governor Hochul's Governor Hochul, right? So if she puts that in place, okay, then everyone snap to it. But we don't have that relationship with the administration. We have had a relationship with the administration where we've been able to give directive or give, set goals or set an expectation. Thank you. And my experience has been this whole time that they
Rise to the.
Thank you,
occasion.
Jackie.
But that's why I like Sid's language, where it says, hey, you have a year to rise to the occasion. Look, I have so much respect, and I know they will do it, right? I know that the administrators will make things happen. Like I said before, they've done amazing things. This is just one of the amazing things they will do. So that's why I like Sid's language, where it's like, we've agreed to, we're going to have a period of transition, but at the end of the day, it's the restricted policy within a year, or starting 25, 26, that will take place.
Let me ask a slightly different way. Sid's proposed some language. Do you have a counter proposal, or what do you think the outcome of this conversation should be?
I'm closer to Jackie's language. where I'd like to see in the policy, I didn't write out specifics, but see in the policy in enforcing the current guidelines for 24-25, and then creating a task force or whatever it would be called to explore what a cell phone-free day looks like with a report back to the board on that. So it's definitely more open, Will, than what we voted on last time. It really leaves it to the. I'm approaching it from the place where I would want to put. In all honesty, I wouldn't even put it in the policy, right? To me, I can see creating the policy that takes the guidelines that are not being enforced and enforces them, and that's the policy. And then we have conversations with Dr. Champ during the retreat, right now, she's listening, all of it, that says, and we've passed this policy, and we would like for the administration to explore what a cell phone-free environment looks like for Pelham Union Free School District. So for me, I wouldn't even put that part in the policy. I wouldn't need to, because that doesn't feel like policy to me. That feels like a conversation and directive and an expectation. And I'll add, because I believe they also feel the way that we do, which is something has to be done. I think that's the difference.
The good thing is
So-
we all feel
and-
something needs to be done.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, just
Yep.
in-
Can I maybe just jump in and make a suggestion? Because I know, we're, excuse me, just from a procedural. I think what I'm hearing just as the listener is really kind of two different philosophies. One is Plan A next year, this year, Plan B the following year as the defining, here's the end point, and your year is meant to determine how we're going to get from point A to point B. And then the other approach I'm hearing is the more lenient, we'll call it the more lenient, Kira's words, next year in some form, and then a study and recommendations at the end of a year of how to move to more phone-free. I don't know if I'm capturing that, but that's kind of what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Yes.
A fixed point with an assessment of how to get from point A to B, or a step forward and an assessment and a report back about what the next step might be.
Right.
So I'm thinking at this point, I think probably a motion needs to be made one way or the other, so that folks can then weigh in on it. And if it passes, that's your direction. If it doesn't, then a different motion gets made and again voted upon. Just my suggestion.
If I can just react to that, and I think you've summarized those sort of two avenues very well. My reaction to that is I would vote in favor of the fixed point, retaining option 2 as the target, and then a sort of transitionary period towards that. And I say that for a few reasons. First of all, we did vote on it, and in the last meeting, and that counts for something. And the second reason is I think that organizations respond well to having a very clear objective. And what I like about option 2 is it is a clear objective. And I am concerned as someone who voted for option 2, no secret in that if we don't have that as the end goal, and stated very clearly as where we want the fixed point to be, we will lose our way on the journey.
I hear you on that. I really do. I hear you on that. And I completely understand where you are coming from and your concern if we don't have a defined objective for the administration to reach, that we won't get there. And I think that's a completely valid concern, and one that I would also, have as well. I think there's if we define a way, like what our expectations are for the administration to come to us with and a way to hold them accountable to their plan, then I think that could help. I'm wondering if that could help the comfort level around making sure that we reach an objective or reach where the end goal is, and that we could be really like collaborative with everyone. Not to say that it's not collaborative. I mean, I think a really big part of our job is to listen to everybody, right? And to listen to the administrators who are running the day to day. Like that's not what we do. But like I'm wondering if defining that and requiring the check-ins or something like that to hold them accountable, if that would add comfort.
I mean, I think you know what I think you know what I think. I would, I support a policy that is version A for 1 year. The administration works on a transition plan with recommendations, and that transition plan, I don't think we have to say in the policy, like, you need to put a committee together. They would do that, right, Dr. Champ? Like, they would do that as part of.
Yeah, that's correct. That does not need to be in the policy.
As part of
It's clear
transition
from this
planning.
conversation, that's what the board wants to see, so that's what will happen.
A transition plan to what I said earlier, a more cell phone free environment that expands beyond the learning spaces, but let them tell us what that looks like.
Right, instead of us telling them what it looks like, they would tell us what it looks like. Yeah.
It's nuanced. We're very close.
I mean, I know, that's like, that's the difference between what we're talking about, right? Is just the two approaches.
Yeah.
What do you think about adding something to your language that speaks to a goal of,
Cell
sort
phone free.
of limiting use to the, as much as is feasible or something, right? So that, like, we give direction on where we'd like to end up.
So limiting as much as it is feasible. And that's the same thing as saying as much as it makes sense for the, yeah.
Or like, acknowledging a board goal of, reducing cell phone use as much as possible within the school building, something like that.
So which, you would add that to the language I was
Yeah, that's what it is,
proposing?
yeah.
So what would that language, so can you just run that language past me
Did you
again?
write it down? Did you write my, or?
Yeah, let me
Where would you put it in?
Yeah.
Here you
Marking
go.
up legislation.
Yeah, go ahead. Mark up my,
It's a good thing we have a lawyer.
No pressure, Sid.
I was like, I can't do it. We're staring at him.
Yeah, so maybe something like, the policy shall transition to include most or all spaces and times within the school being cell phone free as recommended by the administration in a transition plan presented to the board by the end of the 24-25 school year, with a goal of limiting cell phone use within the school
As
building
much
as,
much as
to as
possible.
much, as much as possible.
To the extent possible.
Yeah.
But does it have it as a SMART goal or, well, I guess it's not a goal, it's a policy?
Yeah.
Would it have a date?
I would
Or
actually,
that's aspirational to date?
and we actually might want to have the transition plan available earlier for budget purposes, if there's things we need to put into the. If there are things
Right.
we need to
In
put.
terms of, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
Oh,
off.
yeah, I cut you off. You go first.
No, I'm just saying, so will there be a goal? Because if we have to have a budget for things,
So Jackie's language, before the part that I read, had said that this would be included for the 25 school year.
Okay.
So it would be 1 year
A.
of option A, then for the following year, this would be the policy.
Right, but it does say the transition plan would be presented to the board by the end of the school year, but it probably,
be
it needs to be
before.
sooner so that
Yeah.
if there are things that need to be
Yep.
incorporated into the budget
Yep.
to get there.
Yeah, I wouldn't bound yourself too much. I think we don't, because if you ask us to get it to you in December because we're starting budget process, we're not going to necessarily give the folks at the building sufficient time to do the work they need to do.
Oh, I was thinking,
So-
but you're right, would it be like March or April, or just like in the spring? Would the spring be soon enough?
Yeah, I would think spring, March, April, because then also, there's going to have to be, like you said, there's going to have to be budgeting, ordering, drafting, probably updating of student handbooks. There could potentially be policy updates and all of that to have that in place by this time next year so that we have it all for the start of school would necessitate us being ready by April at the latest. So again, I don't think you have to say that. I think that comes with the directive.
Okay.
right? So, I mean, we could debate this all night long. I mean, we really could. So should we, as Dr. Champ said, like, just, I guess,
Make a motion?
make a motion and take a vote and?
But
Yep.
hang on a
Sure.
second. So are we taking a vote on the words that Sid just read? 'Cause
Yeah.
Yes, you'd be making a motion on the policy as amended. Probably helpful to read it through one more time so everyone's clear on what they're voting for.
Yeah, and I'm the kind of person I need to see it in writing. I don't mean to be difficult, but
No,
this is
I get it.
like, I'll
Or,
listen.
or should the motion, this is gonna be crazy.
Yeah.
Be that we table this,
Crazy motion.
go back to the drawing board yet again.
I'm not in support of that.
Okay.
We need to make a decision tonight.
I mean, I agree that the administrative team needs to know what they need to do.
Yeah, I think it would be good to give, especially our next meeting's not till August, right? So,
All right, so
All right, good, let's see.
all right.
Read
do
it
you want
one
me
more
to-
time,
do you want
or
me to
maybe
read this
several more
again?
times.
let's pay
Okay.
attention.
Yeah,
So the proposal is to reinstate option A for the upcoming school year and include the following for 2025 and beyond. The policy.
And Sid, is this a motion?
Yes.
Well,
Okay.
Well,
Well,
You
we're
didn't
just
quite-
reading
I'm reading it,
first.
and
We're
everyone
reading
can
it first.
consider it,
Okay.
and then
We're
we
reading
can, yeah.
And then we'll make a motion
Yeah.
after. Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Dr.
The policy shall transition to include most or all spaces and times within the school being cell phone free, as recommended by the administration in a transition plan presented to the Board of Education by sometime in the 2024-25 school year. Maybe we say before the budget's approved.
Spring.
For the
Or maybe,
2024-25.
I think if you just say spring
Okay, spring.
of 2025, that should be sufficient.
With a goal of limiting cell phone use on campus to the greatest extent feasible.
To the greatest extent feasible.
Yep.
Okay.
If people have better
Feas-
words than that,
feasible,
that's fine
I like
too.
that.
That's why I, so, just so I could understand, we're going with a policy of what we called option A, so it's, but it will be enforced. So.
Correct.
Cell phone free in the classroom, cell phone free in a lot of spaces. So it will be
With-
enforced.
With some exceptions.
With exceptions that
that's
will be noted.
Yeah.
And for 24-25 and 25-26, cell phone free to the greatest extent possible,
Feasible.
feasible.
That's the target
The
that
goal.
we're putting to the administration to come up with a policy recommendation back to us for approval, right?
A
So
plan, an
A
implementation,
plan.
transition plan.
Implementation plan, right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just going to need to hear it one more. I'm with Anne-Marie.
I'm going to need to hear it
Okay.
a few more times. I'm sorry.
Do you want me to hand it down and you guys can read it?
Maybe.
Would that be
I have to
easier?
read the rest
I'm
of my
actually
note. I'm
like
gonna
you two, I
cut
need
this piece
to-
of paper.
Words.
Why don't we each read it
rip
in
it.
a
Yeah.
range of accents? And
Are you going to be able to do that?
Who didn't bring scissors?
Yeah, I'll bring scissors next time.
Do you want Tracy to make
I'm about to
copies
eat my,
for each one of us?
Oh, we could make copies.
Oh, we can make, Tracy just kindly offered to make a copy.
Go back there and make some copies for you also. You have
Okay.
a document to look at the same time.
Thanks.
I appreciate
Brief.
it.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thanks,
you.
Tracy. Brief copy break.
like a bunny.
What is it? Like a gummy?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't take strawberry.
I was gonna say not the real.
Not that kind of gummy.
No, we know what happens with it, so.
Go where she's going, and then there's a door to the left.
Yeah, like a. Let me make a joke to him.
We had a nice time. We went before the pandemic with the kids. It was fun. It was like water's warm, nice waves. There's like a bunch of golf courses there. So. She did well, but the thing is, there's some doctor tomorrow. Hopefully gets the small impacts. And then a couple more weeks that they're here, and then they go for 4 weeks, the same 4 weeks for both of them, to camp up in Litchfield County. And it's easy, close, 20 minutes away from each other. So, yeah. These are like YMCA. Pretty expensive, actually. You're right on the border. Yeah, the Kent area. How far is Passaic from here? That's good hour. Yeah. Yeah, we should take 684, and that's probably not 40 minutes. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I like the bike program trail. It's just very.
So I
So,
Well, we're getting new ones.
what about
That's why.
someone, yeah.
So we could take a picture on our phone,
Pretty sure it's in the box.
and then at least we'll have.
Take a
the
picture on your
language
phone, which
in
is,
front
will
of
be a
us.
use of the cell phone at the board meeting.
Which I'm going to do, 'cause I need something. So you can take a picture of it on the phone.
Okay.
And then at least we have the language. Which is.
Beautiful country. Kids come back too, but it's sort of good. That's not a rail track, so what's your incline?
Right, I was gonna say, it's gotta be pretty flat.
Yeah.
Here, I kind of know what it is. Or take a
Doesn't he
picture.
need?
Yeah, let me take a picture. Do you need it? They're laughing at me. Sid, do you need this back? You can have, you can have this
Sure,
back.
okay.
So you could read it as our official reader.
Does Dara have the language?
Oh,
I'll text
Dara, I'll text it.
Thank you. Visual too.
So after you have a chance to read it, we can kind of go around one by one and let us know, let me know if.
Wouldn't that be then motion?
It's not a, or we could just take a motion and vote on it, but
What were you gonna propose
I'm
as
gonna
an
propose a
alternative?
motion that, after you guys, after you read this, or somebody make a motion to,
Approve it. Or
yes.
vote on it.
Vote on it.
And can I just encourage you to think about our strategic planning fist to 5?
Yep, I
And
actually
if it's
was.
a 3, a 4, or a 5, that's something that you can support. So just keep that in mind as you go through this last piece of the discussion.
I'm gonna give like a minute.
Do, do, do.
And Dara has it? Okay. Okay. Am I allowed to make a motion? Yes, I can. No, you make a motion.
You can make a motion, can you?
I don't know if you can.
I'm gonna say I can't.
Do you want me to?
Well, I want somebody to, so
Okay.
we can, definitely have to move this along.
Yeah.
we have to.
So I'll make a motion
I
to.
need a minute.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, you get one more minute. You think I can? I'll do it. Okay. Okay. Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the language of the policy that I read earlier as an amendment to the policy that was voted on at the last meeting.
An amendment?
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
I made the, okay.
Oh.
Okay.
No.
Second, so,
Okay.
do you want to hold?
All right, I think we've talked about it. I don't know if we want to have any more discussion on it, or we'll just go to, we'll go for it? Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
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 Wait, any opposed? Any opposed? No?
Do we need to wait for?
Dara voted, didn't
Dara
she?
voted.
Yeah, Dara
Dara
voted.
voted aye.
Dara
Dara
voted.
voted.
I voted.
Yeah.
Yep.
I voted.
Yep. So I think we're all.
Okay,
Yep.
All right.
good
So-
work.
So can we just reiterate, just so everybody's on the same page?
Yep.
We're gonna have a policy which we are, removing cell phones from classrooms and
And
learning
learning
spaces for the 24-25 school year, giving the administration a year where they're gonna present the board with a plan on how to limit cell phone to the greatest extent feasible.
In the,
That-
in,
that-
Not what you agreed to. No, that wasn't it. There was other language in there that said
Yeah.
most, if not all. It's not
Yeah.
what I understood you were doing.
yeah, Sid can read it.
Right.
I can read it, okay. So we would reinstate option A for the upcoming school year and include the following for 2025 and beyond. The policy shall transition to include most or all spaces and times within the school being cell phone free as recommended by the administration in a transition plan presented to the Board of Education by the spring of the 2024-25 school year with a goal of limiting cell phone use on campus to the greatest extent feasible.
Okay. Yes, that's passed.
That's what
That's
was
passed. That's our
approved.
policy,
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
yes. Congratulations on doing that.
I was just going to say. Good job, everybody.
Okay. Let's see, we already did the 15 superintendent's personnel recommendations, so we can move to 16, pupil personnel services.
Oh,
So,
she's gonna have to.
oh, Tracy.
Do we need
just
Tracy here
stepped
for
out
this?
For a second.
Yep,
She
okay.
just stepped out for a second.
No, you don't actually need her there for this,
Yeah,
unless you have questions.
we're sidebarring. Did we have new business?
Do we need 16.1?
Yes, we do, but I didn't know if we wanted to, while we're waiting for Tracy to, I didn't know if we.
Dr. Champ, would you recommend we wait? Tracy just stepped out. For 16.1, do you recommend that we have Tracy in the room for that vote?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
Okay,
not at
so
all
we move on with 16.1? Okay, so do I have a motion to approve Schedule D, Committee on Special Education?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Sid? Sid?
Sid.
We need-
Favor?
Aye.
Good night. Okay, so that passed. We move on to 17, which is new business. Does anyone have new business?
I do not.
No? Okay, I think no communications and comments from the public, they've left. So I would take a,
Got to come back to Tracy, or?
no, we actually
did
did
it?
it, we just did it, yeah. So I would take a motion to adjourn the business meeting.
So moved.
Second.
So can I just say, before we end it, I want to say thank you, Jackie, for leading us on your first meeting as a president.
You're welcome. And thank you for leading us as vice president.
Welcome.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, so now we could
Oh,
vote on ending the meeting.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.